Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion.
Somebody let me know when the commercial's done.
Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Wickedness came into the world with the first being born of woman, Cain, the oldest stepson of Adam. When God bestowed paradise upon the first pair of mankind, he wanted them particularly against carnal intercourse with each other. But after the fall of Eve, Satan, in the guise of the serpent, approached her, and the fruit of their union was Cain, the ancestor of all the impious generations that were rebellious towards God and rose up against him. Cain's descent from Satan, who is the angel Samael, was revealed in his seraphic appearance. At his birth, the exclamation was wrung from Eve, I have gotten a man through an angel of the Lord. Chapter 2, The Legends of the Jews, Louis Ginsberg. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio, and as always, I thank all of you for tuning in from America and around the world. We have, which I'm so very grateful for, but we have audience in all of the English-speaking countries of the world, and so it's a blessing to have our discernment and our work and the things that we've come to revelation upon, to be able to go out there and bless all of you, no matter where you may be, and that each one of us in our walk, in our journey to truth, certainly we have encountered some very strange obstacles and have had to entertain some very weird postulations, but of course, I ask always, and I warn this of everybody, that really we should trust nobody, because in my opinion, most have no real understanding of what truth is and are led astray. Either they are complacent and not really interested in gleaning what it is in the manner that the Most High has revealed it to us, that most people have accepted truth as to the traditions of their fathers, elders, their heritage, the legacy which they have inherited over time and space, and that the lot of what is mainstream thought is certainly has no connection and no resemblance to truth. And so this topic that I alluded to with regard to this passage on Cain having a seraphic appearance, that it was obvious as soon as he was born from many different passages and verses that he was unlike his, who most believe to be his natural father, Adam. And because he had this seraphic appearance, it certainly should have been the first warning to humanity and to everybody across the board that something was odd about Cain, and that because of his differentiation from the other, what became the ancestors of Adam, the people and the children, the sons and daughters that came up of Cain's line, they were considered to be vagabonds, outcasts, and they were to be held separate from what were the generations and the lineage of Adam. And even from the very beginning, where we see he is being ousted, that um, that Adam and Eve warn their children, and they even keep Cain and Abel separate because of a dream which Eve had, where she saw Cain not only murdering Abel but also consuming and drinking his blood. And this occurred after their first offering unto the Most High, when it was on, of course, the festival of first fruits after the Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread. And yes, they did celebrate those same feast days that are mandated to Israel generations and even thousands of years later, but that they observe the same feast. And so, anyways, um, Adam knew to try to keep Cain and Abel separate. And he knew that Cain was not his child, which is why he named him Cain in the first place, meaning acquired or a possession, an acquired possession, which is what still stepchildren are. But anyways, one of the reasons why I'm going to go into this evening is because, in truth, this key teaching, this one lesson, understanding it and embracing it and incorporating it into your mindset, it will change all of the other aspects of your understanding on truth and making sense of the scripture in a manner which you might not otherwise have been led to. And again, when you embrace it and incorporate it fully as teaching and as discernment into your paradigm for understanding the scriptures, it will bring to light so much of what really is ambiguous, even to this day, when clearly, when you have this knowledge base, it makes undeniable some of the things of which Christ alluded to and spoke about. And I'll share a couple of those things with you as well. And then I'm going to share a story which I've never covered in full because it's very extensive, but I think you will be interested in hearing it. It's a fascinating tale. It's a murder investigation, but it's all connected to this as well. And it was specifically funded by an elitist family, one of those that were born into this Illuminati lineage, and he had always wondered if what they had been taught by their families, that they were different and that they were genetically different, if that was indeed true. And so that sets the premise for this whole investigation. But before we go there, I need to share with you a few things. Specifically, I want to look at John chapter 8, verses 37 through 47, where it says, I know that ye are Abraham's seed, but ye seek to kill me. Because my word hath no place in you, I speak that which I have seen with my father, and ye do that which ye have seen with your father. They answered and said unto him, Abraham is our father. Jesus saith unto them, If ye were Abraham's children, ye would do the works of Abraham. But now ye seek to kill me, a man that hath told you the truth, which I have heard of God. This did not Abraham. Ye do the deeds of your father. Then said they to him, We be not born of fornication, we have one Father, even God. Jesus saith unto them, If God were your Father, ye would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Even because you cannot hear my word. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. That's very important. He is the father of it. Why is that important? Because Cain was also a liar, a deceiver, a murderer, and he, again, Satan is the father of it. And Satan, as it says in 1 John chapter 3, Cain, who was of that wicked one, of meaning son or descendant of. And so, I mean, again, these things are clearly written and encoded all throughout the scripture, and yet so many people choose to ignore it or just, they don't want to see it. And so, for that reason, they remain in ignorance. Continuing. And because I tell you the truth, ye believe me not. Which of you convicteth me of sin? And if I say the truth, why do you not believe me? He that is of God heareth God's words. Ye therefore hear them not, because ye are not of God. So if you're not of God, who are you? You are of the devil. There's only two choices here throughout the scripture. We see that you are the seed of the woman, or you are the seed of the serpent. You are the children of promise, children of humanity, or you are the sons of Belial. All right. There's two other passages, and then we'll go into the actual story. This is from Luke chapter 11, verses 47 through 54. It says, Woe unto you, for ye build the sepulchres of the prophets, and your fathers killed them, and your fathers killed them. Truly ye bear witness that ye allow the deeds of your fathers, for they indeed killed them, and ye build their sepulchres. Therefore also said the wisdom of God, I will send them prophets and apostles, and some of them they shall slay and persecute, that the blood of all the prophets which was shed from the foundation of the world may be required of this generation. From the blood of Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, which perished between the altar and the temple. Verily I say unto you, it shall be required of this generation. Woe unto you, lawyers, for ye have taken away the key of knowledge. Ye entered not in yourselves, and them that were entering in ye hindered. So, again, very important. Christ associates the Pharisees, the scribes, as being the murderers of the prophets, from Abel to Zacharias, who was John the Baptist's father. And so Christ is tying the garden with the beginning of the seed lines, Cain and Abel, the seed of the serpent and the enmity of the seed of the woman, to his time. And so he's blaming them, their bloodline, their fathers, their ancestors, as being those that assassinated, that murdered and killed and plotted against the children of Adam, even up into his day and age. And then he says, "For ye have taken away the key of knowledge, and ye entered not in yourselves, and them that were entering you hindered." And what's he talking about? He's talking about salvation, the knowledge that he is Christ. He is the Son of God. He is the Savior Messiah. And that it would be through him that all things would be fulfilled, and that grace and salvation would come because he is the Passover lamb. As John said, "Behold the lamb that takes away the sins of the world." And so that's what they hid. They knew who he was. They revealed it in their own words. Their prophecies told them without question who he was. And yet they hid it from their own people and their generations, and all the way up until the time now. One last passage, and this is the same thing, but it comes from Matthew. It gives us a little bit more elaboration. "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye are like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones, and all uncleanness. Even so ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within ye are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! Because ye build the tombs of the prophets, and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous, and say, If we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Wherefore ye be witnesses unto yourselves that ye are the children of them which killed the prophets. Fill ye up then the measure of your fathers. Ye serpents, ye generations of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell?" And so here he associates them to serpents and to vipers. And who else is said to have had a seraphic appearance? Cain. And he was said to have a serpentine countenance when he was born. All right, continuing. "Wherefore, behold, I sent unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them shall ye scourge in your synagogues, and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias son of Barachias, whom ye slew between the temple and the altar." And so nobody even knew that, but he knew it. He knew who had killed John's father, the high priest Zacharias. And he knew that they were conspiring to murder him. So he knows who our enemy is. It's the sons of Adam, the children of light, which have had this knowledge taken from them and hidden from them. "Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation." And so, again, we are shown exactly who it is are the murderers. And I mean, there's no denying. I mean, you cannot exclude Cain from as being the progenitor, the patriarch of this bloodline, because he was the one that murdered Abel. There's no question about it. So anybody that denies serpent seed, ask him to explain this passage. because you can't explain it unless you open yourself to it as possibility. Because again, Christ is telling us who were the murderers of the prophets, and then he gives you their lineage from the time of Cain and the garden, the very beginning of it, unto his time. Because some of the Pharisees that were there and that were looking to murder him were the very ones that had murdered Zacharias. And that's what he's alluding to in this particular passage. All right, so with that in mind, I want to revisit a story, and I'm going to give you the link for it, just in case I don't get a chance to finish it. This was an alert that was put out a long time ago. Let me make a copy of the link, and I will put this in the show description as well. But I'm gonna post it in the chat room. This was a Steve Quayle alert that was put out. Oh, happy birthday, Gina! And thanks for being with us, sister. It's good to see everyone. Causation, Shane, Stephanie, Laurel, Gina, Olive, and Piney, Guy, Steph, and Stephanie, and the rest of you that are in the chat. We appreciate all of you being here. And so this is going to be a very interesting story. It came out a very long time ago. And as I said, it's a murder investigation. I'll give you the backdrop of the story. You can read, it's very long. As you see when you open it, it's in several different parts. I've never covered the fullness of this in a show, and so we're going to try to get through it this evening. It says, life as an investigator is like a box of chocolates. Intelligence source. This is several different parts. And it's basically an individual that was hired. He was hired by, I'm going to have to maximize this, hold on. A geneticist to confirm whether the children of Cain truly were different in their DNA genetic makeup. And so I have to maximize this 1 second. Okay, I had to post this into a document file because it didn't fit right on the website. Okay, beginning. An investigator friend was telling me a story I can easily relate to. One time he says, I left home on a lazy Saturday evening to grab some comfort food. I told the wife, I'll be right back. As my dog, having heard the car keys jingle, dutifully pushed his way through the door to assist me on my mission. He instinctively knew I'd forget his doggy treats if he wasn't right there to assist me. Minutes later, as I was walking out of the store with my booty, I saw a man who I'd been searching for as the subject of a complex embezzlement scheme. He was walking to a rented moving van and towing his classic car on a trailer behind it. 9 days and 3,500 miles later, I completed my fieldwork and handed the investigation over to several federal agencies on what had now become a federal case. I returned home to my very distraught bride of 6 months. We were supposed to have left on our already twice delayed honeymoon cruise the previous Sunday morning. We didn't have cell phones in those days, and I didn't have a radio in my personal car. My handheld was on the charger at home when I'd gone on my quick trip. My first call came during a brief fuel stop at 4 a.m. the next morning. The hurried explanations fell on incredulously deaf ears between her astonished and uncharacteristically numerous expletives. For some months I'd been telling her, third time's a charm. Guess I was wrong. Again, she was not amused. He concluded his hour-long story stating very matter-of-factly, I guess I sort of understand why she divorced me. I sure do miss her. He then proceeded to explain how this life lesson had led him to understand one of his many laws of investigations, which, like a box of chocolates, come in no particular order and are only predictable in their unpredictability. I then proceeded to break what is now one of my laws. Never ask this guy a question without having first taken a bathroom break. He tends to be pretty long-winded, but the stories are generally worth it. I asked, what are some of the other laws you've come up with? I knew the moment the words came out of my mouth, I should have restricted my question to just one law. Hard to do with good chocolates. Without breaking stride, he says, belief is the driver of action, and proceeded into another long and winding story in order to give me his history for the law. About 20 years ago, oh boy, my first clue, this was going to take a while. I had recently completed my latest physics project at a location that uses a number for a name. A colleague from my time as an Air Force OSI agent specializing in advanced science and technology had heard I was heading to England for a long overdue vacation and asked me if I'd volunteer to help him while I was there. He needed a witness on a simple mission to collect some evidence. Unwittingly, I said, sure, no problem. Oh, nuts. I just violated a law every service member knows all too well. Never volunteer. The smallest chocolates are always the ones with the nuts, usually. We went to a private city. Within the city, security was well concealed, but omnipresent to a trained eye. We went to a private office and met with a man whom I later came to know as a member of one of the wealthiest families on the planet. He talked with us briefly about funding for a scientific investigation my friend is going to pursue. He invited us to dine with him at his residence later in the evening. In the interim, my friend proceeded to tell me how the man had apparently had a near-death experience during a medical procedure. He apparently had a Pauline-like angelic encounter during which opaque and serpent-like scales had fallen from his eyes in the presence of a divine messenger. Layer after layer of lies and deceptions dissolved before him. At its conclusion, he came to a belief his entire life was one big rubber band roll of tangled lies, every new one bigger than the last. He'd resolved to turn to a new way and set out to change his life and the world. After dinner, we collected blood tissue, hair, and oral swabs. He had recently had a dental procedure and had saved a tooth, which he dutifully preserved in a small paper bag in his freezer. I videotaped the collection process as the evidence was bagged and tagged. On the plane ride back stateside, my friend was at the time one of the most knowledgeable DNA researchers on the planet. Pulled out the biggest piece of mental jerky I've ever gnawed on. His benefactor, test subject, believed that while most of the sons of Adam had double strand DNA, he had been told by his family that he and his blood relatives were distinctly different, and that he, like his fathers before him, had triple strand DNA. He wanted my friend to secretly prove once and for all if this was true or not. The subject claimed that his extended family and their cousins, who are kings, queens, princesses and princesses, as well as leaders of industry and banking worldwide, believe that they are children of an otherworldly race of humanoid beings. He'd been taught by his tutors that once upon a time, his ancestors had fallen to Earth after some cosmic calamity in the time before the garden. He believed that whilst their ancestral mother was Eve, their ancestral father was not Adam. He was torn to know if a child of Cain was actually genetically different and whether he could be saved. My friend never got the money for his investigative research, as the donor was found dead in his apartment a short while later. The death was ruled a suicide by hanging, even though his feet were found to be barely touching the floor when he was discovered. Very strange. My friend's wife gave me all of his research and notes upon his own untimely death some years later, leading me to bite into another chocolate in the law of investigations box. Fact is often stranger than fiction. Part 2. The beginning of a previously unexpected trip down the rabbit's hole. My investigator friend continued his tale after my return from an overdue bathroom break. It was a long plane ride home. The funeral had been difficult for me. Losing a close friend at such a young age was not easy. Because of the nature of his work and mine, our talks had mostly been cryptic and necessarily too few and too far and few in between. His young wife had only been with him a short while. Much of his early years and most of his real life were completely hidden from her. Need to know type of stuff, and she didn't. So she didn't. Flash drives were common then. A removable hard drive sat in the open briefcase on the seat next to me in what originally had been a box of Christmas cards. A lone card sat on top of the unusual assortment of contents. It pictured a cat who had apparently licked the socket of a strand of Christmas lights that its owner was stringing atop a tree. It was a snowy setting in front of a festively lit home. The cat was amusingly adorned in a tangle of colored lights as it hung mid-air between the starry heavens and its hell, every limb painfully extended in a different direction, and every hair standing on end under the shock of electrocution. A similarly shocked dad was teetering atop of his now tipping ladder next to a window where small children and the wife, mouth agape, watched helplessly. An old hound dog lay on the porch nearby, barely raising one eye to take in the entertainment. And with the crowning star of David blazing briefly in his hand, only moments from the completion of his task, Dad was now headed on a previously unexpected trip, and so was I. Although the sticky note affixed to the top of the box stated simply 107, an operational code name I was once known by. The card, when opened, stated my Christian name simply with the following brief message: do what you do. I'll expect a complete report when you get here, since if you're reading this, I've already gone ahead. He signed the card Slowpoke. That was a name I had given him once when we were young and brimming over with life and innocence. Reading the note, my eyes uncontrollably began to tear up. I suddenly felt much, much older and alone. I dwelt on the card, his note, and our very unusual lives. For the rest of my long trip home, good friends, old friends, aren't easy to come by. When I arrived in my city, I was very backed up in my work and I couldn't really look at what I had for some time. For one thing, I didn't immediately know how to access the hard drive. And when I did, the information was password protected. And he seemingly hadn't included a password with the box. It was quite some time later that it occurred to me that he actually had, and that was the true reason for the catchy card at the top of the box. Yeah, he was right, and I was slow. It was all there, his contacts, his drawings and descriptions. His technical analysis was not easy to read, but I had enough more than general knowledge to follow his work. He traveled covertly to meet with specialists, including one Nobel laureate, to get their opinion on his observations and analysis. He'd even met with some very prominent religious authorities of varied beliefs to get their take on the possible implications of what he believed he had found. He was exceedingly careful and always traveled under some other role and purpose, and only as a peripheral inquiry brought his real questions to bear, conscious of the dangerous sensitivity of the subject at hand. Near the end of his notes, I came to a page titled Conclusions, followed by these lines. This is a murder investigation, which was then followed on a separate line written in capitals of murder by a serial murderer. He then went into several pages of a long diatribe of identifiers and details that only recently have begun to make sense to me. Under a new heading, followed the blood trail. At first, he noted that the DNA strands he was examining seemed to be wound more tightly than normal. You see, there are normally 10 rungs per complete twist of the double helix strand in normal human DNA. In his analysis of our subject's DNA, taken from his blood samples, he found intermittent sections which appeared to be wound more tightly, with only 9 rungs per complete twist, 9 being an unusual and noteworthy number, always turning and returning to itself. I thought to myself, that doesn't seem to be that unusual. Everybody I know seems like they're wound too tight. Simultaneously, he observed and documented what he at first believed to be the foretold third strand of the subject's DNA. Upon closer analysis, he came to an entirely different and unexpected conclusion. Our subject had been lied to. It wasn't a third strand at all. It was a silvery thread-like, semi-transparent, serpentine-like parasite of infinitesimally small proportions. He observed that it was entangled, intermittently hopping back and forth between the normal double helix strands. It appeared to him that as the parasite grew, it continued to wrap itself like a bean of ivy-type vine plant will attach itself to any available protrusion. Unlike a normal snake or worm, this parasite had little hooks like protrusions that did seem to lend themselves to a gripping type attachment all along the strand. His notes described them all as alligator or dragon feet, but only for his amusement, not because they were that actual form. Occasionally, he noted that it appeared that some of the threaded parasites seemed to connect to adjacent parasites, creating what appeared to be tiny nets. In his notes, my friend penned some personal thoughts after having considered his observations and the source of his DNA materials. He thought of the Vatican's pronouncement that the aliens are our cousins, and the Vishnu teachings of a time when gods flew in spaceships and destroyed whole cities in a single blast. He even had notes about Elijah being caught up in a chariot of fire. Maybe he had misread or misunderstood the entire history of his Bible. maybe from Genesis to Revelation, it was about some far more tangible and real fallen angel alien cousins than the ghost like destroying angels he'd always pictured in his imagination. He gazed at it and studied it in shocked disbelief and asked to himself, is this pathetic little blood sucking worm the tiny origin of the tyrannical destroyer of so many lives and worlds? But he could not escape the fact that, small as it were, the DNA strands that they were attached to were just as small, and both had the informational encoding to make good or evil. Yes, the DNA and the serpentine creature entangled in it potentially bore the information, the knowledge, the blueprint to create good or evil. My investigator friend continued, I remembered the time I had sat with a hard, cold desk under my arms as I stared back into the false Cheshire grins surrounding that mouthful of fake pearly whites. He was staring me down from his star chamber seat, waiting for my answer from the front of the concealing screen, which provided me only partial anonymity from the rest of the gallery. You see, he thought he caught me in a lie with what I had told his in-house investigator. But his investigator's authorizations and clearance were not the same as the senator's. I replied, quote, as you know, Senator, the lie is different at every level. And so it was, and so shall it always be, in this life, anyways, from the highest thrones in this world, and now, here again, right down to the tiniest strands of DNA. It's lies, 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 all the way down. The truth is, the so called third strand of DNA that somehow could make them superior was just another lie from the father of lies. In the end, it was just another lecherous, parasitic, alien hitchhiker on the road of life, trying to deceive the vulnerable into forfeiting their birthright for a bag of magic beans. My friend tried and was trying at the time of his death to determine if there was a way to separate the writhing and gripping entanglements of the demon seed's form from the host DNA without destroying the host. He also speculated on possible ways to identify the reptilian hosts who walk among us while living in the grip of the reptilian seed's alien possession. He was here. It was here that I began my work, picking up where my friend had too abruptly left off. Deep in my thoughts, my friend continued. Once again, I'd reached into life's box of chocolates. Interesting thing, he noted. There's usually some chocolate covered jellies with red colored sprinkles on top in life's little box of chocolates, and I liked those, but this time it seemed like I'd reached instead for the three pastel colored, hard shell candy coated nuts at the center of the box. I did remember clearly that it seemed like just as I closed my eyes and started to munch, I began to feel dizzy, and for only a moment before I felt myself begin to spin and teeter over and down into the rabbit's hole. Part 3. To serve man. There are 3 more laws of investigation my investigator friend brought to my attention, and he then began quoting them to me. Pellegrino, Powell, and Sir Isaac Asimov penned the 3 laws of alien behavior. The first, their survival will be more important than our survival. If an alien species has to choose between them and us, they won't choose us. It is difficult to imagine a contrary case. A species don't survive by being self-sacrificing. Number 2, wimps don't become top dogs. No species makes it to the top by being passive. The species in charge of any given planet will be highly intelligent, alert, aggressive, and ruthless when necessary. Number 3, they will assume that the first 2 laws apply to us. My friend told me how his dizzying mental fall was eventually arrested by a very hard floor in the mixed box of investigators' laws. My friend calls life those 3 pastel colored candy coated, chocolate covered nuts. Apparently, can be some very hard pills to swallow. He told me, Doug, rousing me like a freight train, Doug, it hit me like the hard ground we're standing on. It's all around us, everywhere. They think of us like aliens, but they're the aliens. Don't you get it? They're laughing at us. They think they're the children of space aliens from another world, marooned on this tiny blue orb. They're just doing time till they can figure out a way off of this rock so they can get back up to their Death Star moonship, figure out how to fix it, and head back home to mommy. I sat there listening as he talked. I looked at the heart-shaped Valentine's box of chocolates I'd given my wife earlier in the week, and sure enough, when I opened it, she hadn't eaten any yet, but she had humored me with a perfunctory, "It's the thought that counts," and a peck on the cheek. I guess it's some kind of highbrow female smarter than everyone else, non-fat thing. Anyway, sure enough, there they were, the delightfully showcased evil omens, just as described by my friend. 3 large pastel-colored candy-coated and chocolate-covered nuts, just as my friend described. Forewarned is forearmed, that's what I say. I picked a safe, fat and round soft chocolate or 2 before I put the lid back on the box. I wasn't ready to drink that Kool-Aid yet, but I also wasn't shutting him down either. He continued, "See the way I see it, it's all about the blood. They marry and intermarry to keep the alien blood pure. That's why all the incestuousness in these elites, royal cliques, they're keeping it all in the family." He then explained how he'd found that this guy and that girl were actually related to some other guy who wasn't the guy we were all lied to about. That was so and so official's father or mother. After a while, it actually started to make some kind of sense. Or maybe the blood sugar was just starting to kick in and make me a little tipsy. Anyway, whatever, I lazily thought to myself. I started off into space, deep in my hypoglycemically induced contemplative thoughts. On the shelf beside the TV in my den, an old VHS video box set, its title staring back at me. I was a zombie for the FBI. It's a campy 80s black and white B movie some college kids made about some brothers who discovered some sunglasses that, when worn, allow them to see aliens masquerading as humans and plotting to destroy the real humans and take over the earth. A more well-known movie version is They Live. As I adjusted my reading glasses, I had a few new thoughts of my own. What if? What if? Then rousing me again out of my darkness with his now booming voice, my investigator friend said, "It." And then he said it again, and more slowly and decisively. And just then it struck me. It struck me like a silver bullet to my politically incorrected brain. The haze half cleared, and for a long moment I realized exactly what he'd been trying to say all along. The clouding scales began to fall from my eyes also, just as they had for our subject in his near death experience. I briefly thought, am I on the verge of my own diabetic induced coma? Perhaps, like our original subject, I was having an near death experience of my own. I reached for the water on the table beside me, but it was actually the grandkids' Kool-Aid. I drank it anyway as I thought to myself, it doesn't really matter what I believe. It doesn't matter what the lying facts say. It doesn't matter what any technical analysis reveals. It doesn't even matter what the religious sages thought or believe. It only matters what they believe. Because our original subject and his relatives, who are kings, queens, princesses, and princesses, as well as leaders of industry and banking worldwide, believe and act as though they are children of an otherworldly race of humanoid beings. But not human only, hybrid human, more than human, superior alien humans. Our subject and his kin had been taught by their families and tutors that once upon a time their ancestors had fallen to earth after some cosmic calamity in the time before the garden. He believed that while their ancestral mother was Eve, their ancestral father was not Adam. They believe they are our humanoid cousins, superior, hybrid, half alien, and only half human. They once reigned from Olympus and were pharaohs. Whatever the real truth of their history, their belief, uh, I think we are at commercial break. Anyone in the chat room, let me know if we're at commercial. I believe so. We'll pick it up on the other side.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
All right. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And we are back for a second hour. You're welcome, Shane. And, all right, we're going to get into the rest of this story because I find it to be absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Jer. I appreciate that, brother. And yes, for those that don't know the story of Nicholas de Vere, he is the author of The Dragon Legacy, and it's an insider's tale of his bloodline, the Royal Order of the Dragon, that his family has been tied to this particular He calls it the Elven bloodline. Um, but of course, they're the descendants of Cain. Now, I don't, as far as everything that he writes and all the things that he attests, I don't agree with every aspect of his work, but certainly I do believe that the elites, especially those that are sitting on the thrones of the world today, and that have been historically the murderers of the prophets, and those that have conspired even the murder of Christ, and in this day and age that assassinate and plot and kill and murder the innocents, people in Syria, people everywhere all over the world, that these groups are involved with those tragedies, and that this has been something that has been part of their secret societies and their blood oaths and the things which they have trafficked in and been involved in for hundreds of years. All right, so continuing now. They believe they are our humanoid cousins, superior. Oh, one last thing with regard to Nicholas de Vere, and the reason that I brought his name up is because, according to what I understand, is that upon releasing his books and speaking about and talking openly about these kind of things, um, he was murdered, and in the same manner that he was hung, but his feet could still reach the floor. And so, that is basically announcing, hiding it in plain sight, that they were responsible for his death, and that it was the same kind of thing that they have brought out against many others that they've used, even Princess Diana and her death, and others, that those things are proclamations to others as to judgment being brought upon them by these particular organizations and these families. All right, continuing. They believe that they are our humanoid cousins, superior hybrids, half alien and only half human. They once reigned from Olympus and were pharaohs. Whatever the real truth of their history, their belief is the driver of their actions. Being the true believers they are, they will continue to operate in accordance with their belief and the laws of alien Darwinian type survival. That's why they interbreed, to maintain the purity of the bloodline. That's why they secretly meet and connive to pass power between themselves. And that's why they must fool the rest of mankind into wars of self destruction and death, so that we may be forever enslaved to their lusts on this prison planet, till death do us part. More than afraid, they know in their hearts this is a fight for survival. The fight for survival. It had begun, just as my friend had said, as a murder investigation, starting with the first murder, when that Luciferian demon dad had first whispered of the evil deed to his willing child, Cain. It continued down through time, the sons of Adam fighting for survival and destroying the alien giants in Canaan land, David and the hybrid Goliath and his 4 hybrid brothers, and all the hidden true believers since, hiding in plain sight, so powerful, so important, yet so afraid. I was reminded how in the mountains of Afghanistan, the people would say their cousin lives on the other side of that mountain, then in the next breath remind you that the word for cousin is interchangeably the same word meaning enemy. interchangeably. These earthbound half cousins of ours continue to laugh, but it is a nervous laugh at that, as they have a joke or two at our expense, recreating their lying father's fall to earth and flashing their heretofore secret gang sign, hand signs to each other, right in our face. I know now how dangerous their beliefs are, because they are being driven by their beliefs, taught to them by their real alleged father, the father of lies. And even now he knows the truth and whispers in his initiate's ears, just as he first did in Cain's ear. The sons of Adam, as long as they live, are dangerous. Just then, my friend began to cite another law, stating, "And when you're finally out of chocolates, it's time to make stew." I begged his indulgence for a few minutes as I wandered down the hall to the restroom. I was wondering to myself, where did I leave my ladder? I gotta get out of this rabbit hole before the bad guys figure out there's no rabbits for the rabbit stew they're dreaming up for their cauldron. They might decide to change cookbooks to suit whatever else they might find. Yes, there it is, I thought. They thought to serve man. February 21st, 2013. And so you can see that this knowledge has been out there for a very long time with regard to the elites and their knowing association to Cain and to his bloodline. That it's very clear from the words of Christ, even in the passages that I shared with you in John chapter 8, verses 37 through 47, in Luke chapter 11, verses 47 through 54, in Matthew chapter 23, verses 27 through 39, that if you read First John chapter 3, the entire book is about the distinction, the differentiation between these two bloodlines. And not only that, but the entire Bible is about the differentiation between these two seed lines, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And so, you know, uh, one of the best places to get greater clarity on this, and so many people say, oh, there's nothing in the Bible that speaks about the devil having children or Cain being his seed, which that's completely false. There's so many things connected all throughout the scripture which allude to and elaborate upon this, what Christ called something that was hidden since the foundations of the world. That this knowledge, this teaching, for whatever reason, it is completely condemned and ostracized. And those that share it and that have knowledge of it and that allude to it, we are overwhelmingly condemned, ridiculed, and judged and labeled as protagonists and heretics and blasphemers. And yet, you know, because of course many of you know that a lot of people have come out against me for not only this teaching but others that I support in sharing the truth that I have come to discernment upon. But that many of these individuals, when they criticize and condemn me, and I ask them to debate me on it, they refuse to do so. When I simply ask them to share discourse, to go chapter by chapter, verse by verse, in sharing our differing opinions on this particular subject matter, to do that, they absolutely will not, because, in my opinion, the evidence is so overwhelmingly against them with regard to the truth. And so the only way that they can hold on to their opposition and their um, perspective is to ignore it and to not examine it in any kind of depth. Because if you do so, again, it is undeniable. And so many people go to Genesis chapter 4 and say, "Oh, that's the trump card. Adam knew his wife Eve, and she brought forth Cain and said, 'I have gotten a man from the Lord.'" Yet they don't even understand the context of that passage, because if you understood it fully, you would know that it is actually referencing that it was Eve's desiring the angel Samael, which led to her conception with Cain, and that she added to bear later Abel, um, eh, when she repeated the act of eating the fruit with her husband Adam. And that the reason you see that particular passage at the beginning of Genesis chapter 4 is because that chapter shares in detail the 10 generations of Cain, which are excluded from Adam's bloodline and lineage, found in Genesis chapter 5. And so it would make absolute sense that if the serpent is, and absolutely I know without a doubt he is Cain's father, that passage would be located at the beginning of Genesis chapter 4. Because he, being the progenitor, the patriarch of this evil bloodline, he would most certainly be the first one listed there, and that all of his children and all of the generations thereafter him would also be cited in this passage. In this chapter. And then we have immediately with the beginning of Genesis chapter 5 a reflection on Seth, because Abel was murdered by his half brother, Seth being born in the likeness and similitude of Adam. And that was Adam's second son, as it says in Jubilees chapter 4, verse 7. And so there's so many confirming witnesses to this as teaching and to this as knowledge, and yet most 99% of the pastors and preachers out there, these so-called teachers of truth, they will absolutely not even speak on this, not debate it, not even want to have conversation on it, because they hate this information so hardcore. And yet, again, in my opinion, it is declared openly and multiple times by Christ, which, even just reviewing Matthew chapter 13, it's undeniable that there's so many parables alluding to this, to the distinction between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. It is found interwoven all throughout Scripture. I'll read really quickly, just the several different times. Because again, it's absolutely undeniable. And then when you have knowledge like the story that I just shared with you, the information of these elites, examining their own genetics and their own bloodlines, and then finding these anomalies, and there being some weirdness to, to their particular genetics. It's all, in my opinion, confirming witness. And why now? Because this is absolutely critical for us as the children of Adam, the seed of the promise, to understand who our enemies are and why it is that they've been warring against us for so long, and why it is that they are so determined to murder us, and why it is they are so dedicated to the devil. Because why would anybody want to side with the devil? Well, if you are his child and you are born of his blood lineage, and it's through your families that the world is run, controlled, and the banks maintain, and the Ponzi scheme um, perpetuated, then having all that power, all that authority, all that control, and for those that consider themselves above the law and that can indulge in all kind of abominable pleasures and lusts and things of that nature, which just boggles the mind of those of us that are rational and that can't even comprehend, their involvement in pedophilia and raping and punishing their own children. I mean, it's absolutely sadistic and twisted and doesn't make any kind of sense to us. And yet, this is the reality of what's going on in the world. Laurel had told me earlier, called me and told me about recently. Well, it's not even recent, but about how even the New York City Police Department had come across evidence showing um, Hillary Clinton and Uma Abedin, her personal secretary that was used to be married to Anthony Weiner, the congressman who got busted sexting images of himself to underage girls, and having his computer confiscated. There were all kind of other things found on that with regard to the WikiLeaks, and supposedly they have in evidence a video that shows them um, raping and taking advantage of and even slaughtering a young innocent girl, and then defacing her, if I understand correctly, defacing her and wearing her face as a mask, and then drinking the blood of this innocent girl who being terrorized over time had all of her endorphins flood her blood, and they drank it as a drug. And that this has been something that the elites have been involved in for a very long time. Nothing new under the sun. That even in Malachi chapter 3, it speaks about how, or I think it's Micah chapter 3, in the scriptures, it talks about how they were involved in flaying the skin off of the, the different people and preparing them as pot, as stew, um, preparing their flesh as stew for the cauldron. And this is in the scriptures. I'll read it to you for those that don't believe it. It's Micah 3. It says, "And I said, Hear, I pray you, O heads of Jacob, and ye princes of the house of Israel. Is it not for you to know judgment, who hate the good and love the evil, who pluck off their skin from off of them, and their flesh from off their bones, who also eat the flesh of my people, and flay their skin from off them, and they break their bones and chop them in pieces, as for the pot, and as flesh within the cauldron? Then shall they cry unto the Lord, but he will not hear them. He will even hide his face from them at that time, as they have behaved themselves ill in their doings." And so here, God is telling you the kind of abomination, the kind of involvement that they are in with, you know, eating the flesh and cooking up people for the pot. I mean, again, nothing new under the sun. And this is the kind of thing that continues even in this day and age, and that is perpetuated by the elite. So the insanity is ongoing. It's ongoing. And so, I wish that the New York Police Department or the FBI or somebody would act upon the evidence that has been uncovered. How anybody could work for law enforcement and then have such information or such video turn up and then not do anything about it. I mean, if that's not complicity, I don't know what is, especially when it comes to the protection of the innocents. And, according to Kevin Annett and others, that have lawsuits and things out against the elites of the world in different places for their involvement in mass sacrifice of children and the pedophilia and things of that nature. Um, they speak of hunting parties where they would keep the genitals of those that were hunted down as trophy. And these are, things that have come out in multiple countries about these elitist hunting parties and about how they would um, track down and hunt down these homeless or drugged up teens or, drug addicts or whatever. I mean, the insanity of it all is just too bizarre to believe. But, this is what we are contending with. This is what we deal with. And so I just hope that people wake up and learn more about what's really going on in the world, because when you do, it's undeniable that those that are in power are involved in some very twisted and very weird and strange behavior. And that certainly, the whole thing of draining the swamp, that would be a really nice thing. But Trump never intended to do anything about it, even though so many people had their hopes up high that something would be done. But, in my opinion, and as we said it and called it from the very beginning, he's from the same side. I mean, they are always two sides of the same coin. Republican, Democrat. I know so many people had, hope that he would be different and that there would be, almost like Obama when he first entered office, and how everybody was filled with hope and change, and they thought, we'd be on a different path, and he was going to stop all the domestic surveillance and all the Patriot Act abuses and all that. And no, none of that happened. He followed the same agenda. He expanded the deficit greater than any other president before him, even George Bush. And George Bush, and when he was in office, his 8 years, when he wrecked our economy, and he borrowed more money than all the other presidents before him. And then Obama, when he gets in office, he triples that, what George Bush spent in his 8 years in office. And we went from a surplus from the time that, because Clinton, um, he shut down the government and forced them to have a balanced budget, which, we need that even right now. I mean, government should not be allowed to pass a budget without it being balanced, and to put deficit upon and debt upon the children of America. I mean, that's, in my opinion, the Federal Reserve, they're the ones that, created all this debt. They should be the ones that own it. They are a privately owned banking institution. Um, they have no concern or care for the American people. And in my opinion, we should not own that debt. They are a private company. Let them own it and deal with it and contend with it. And so, anyways, by the time Obama leaves office, we're so far in debt that there's no way we can ever recover or ever get out of it. And so, we who really knows from where to from here. All right, now let's see. I just want to share a couple other things here with the Matthew 13 verse 24 through 30. And really, you can start from the very beginning and read the entire, but I only am going to allude to these portions because I know it will take the fullness of the time that we have remaining, and that it will also it's precise to what we're speaking about. It says, "Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like unto a man which sowed good seed in his field." And I would invite you also to do an extensive word study on not just Matthew 13, but Genesis chapter 3. And you will find that in the Greek outlined in Matthew 13, you will have the same kind of words associated to the Hebrew, which is in Genesis chapter 3, and that expounds upon the beguilement of Eve and how it was that she lost her chastity, how things like touch and see and eat, things like that, they have everything to do with descendants, progeny, children. All right, continue. "Sowed good seed in his field, but while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also." And so, here again, it tells you that an enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat. And that, Christ basically says, allow both to grow together until the time of the end, because even though the tares are planted among the wheat, you can't just root them up. I mean, you can't just pull them up and wipe them out when they had not yet committed sin, even though they have an evil disposition. I mean, that he would be a murderer for doing so. I mean, that's like the whole thing with Esau. I hated, which again, that has to do with uh, our first estate and election and all that. But it is election which determines the distinction between whether one is born into the world as a seed of the serpent or a seed of the woman. But it's over the course of our lifetimes and our actions and our behaviors and the things that we choose to do, the decisions that we make, that really number us with either the elect or those that are condemned. And it's no longer whether you are born into one bloodline or the other, because Christ dying on the cross gave us all grace and extended salvation to all. The Gentiles and the Jews both being grafted into the same family. All right, continuing. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? So he said unto them, An enemy hath done this. Very important. An enemy hath done this. That enemy we see later is described as being the wicked one, who Cain, who was of that wicked one, and that this wicked one is also called the devil, which we know the devil to be the adversary of man, Samael, the angel of death, the poison of God, the viper of God. The servant said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. And so, I mean, that's telling you the whole story of the enmity between these two bloodlines, and how it would be that all the way to the time of the end, that with his return, with his second advent, this war would be ongoing until that time, to the harvest, meaning that the serpent seed survived the flood. The serpent seed is ongoing with us even in this day and age. They weren't wiped out by Noah's flood or by Joshua in Canaan land, but they are with us even today, even right now. All right, continuing. And then, again, the first portion of the parables are those written for the multitudes. And then Christ, after sending the multitudes away, his apostles come up to him and ask him to personally, privately, explain to them what the parable of the tares of the field is, what it means, and what the true story behind it really is. And so he says, Then Jesus sent the multitude away and went into the house. His disciples came unto him, saying, Declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field. In the Apocalypse of Peter, it says, We know it not. He answered and said unto them, He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. Remember 1 John chapter 3, verse 12? Cain, who was of that wicked one? This is what it's alluding to here. And it's telling you that Cain is the first child of this wicked one. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. So the wicked one is the devil, the adversary, Samael, the angel of death, which which not only sowed the tares, but he is the enemy of humanity and also the adversary of Christ, of the Father. He is the rebel one. So, continuing. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. I mean, it doesn't get any clearer than that. And yet, there's nothing in there that says that the devil has children. And when you look up the tares are the children of the wicked one. children, progeny, descendants, you know? I mean, but, you know, I don't, it's just, to what extent people will go to ignore and to read over. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. The harvest is at the end of the world. And so he's again reiterating numerous times throughout this chapter and others that the harvest that he's speaking about with his second advent is at the end of the world. And the reapers are the angels. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be in the end of this world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend and them which do iniquity. He shall cast them into a furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. And so, again, he goes into, he repeats it multiple times, even after that, about how, let me find it. And it's all throughout the scriptures. It's in the Apocrypha, it's in the Pseudepigrapha, it's in the extra biblical text, it's in all throughout the scriptures. There are so many passages which cannot be explained otherwise. A lot of what is revealed in the Nag Hammadi codices is the same kind of thing. I mean, you can't explain it any way other. All right, so he explains it a couple more times when he goes into about the net. The kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven. Oh, wait. All these things spake Jesus unto the multitude in parables, and without a parable spake he not unto them, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things which have been kept secret from the foundation of the world. And then, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a net that was cast into the sea and gathered of every kind, which when it was full they drew to shore and sat down and gathered the good into vessels, but cast the bad away. So shall it be at the end of the world. The angels shall come forth and sever the wicked from among the just, and shall cast them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Jesus saith unto them, Have ye understood all these things? They saith unto him, Yea, Lord. All right, so, and so, multiple times. And then even when you go down to Matthew 23, where it's talking about the wise and the foolish virgins. And then it goes into the parable of the goat and the sheep. It's the same thing. And you have taught again the whole thing of, the scribes and Pharisees and being a den of vipers and how they have been hiding the kingdom, hiding the knowledge. Same kind of thing. Over and over, he tells us who the enemies of humanity are and how the scribes and the Pharisees, the lawyers, hypocrites, they are involved with the murder of the prophets. Matthew 25. Okay, after the the parable of the talents, the parable of the wise and the foolish virgins. And then he goes on to say, um, speaking of the division at the harvest, and cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him. Then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come ye, blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was an hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. Naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee and hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed? When saw we sick or in prison and came to thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me. Then shall he also say unto them of the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. And so, hell, Sheol, God had to create Sheol as a place of punishment for the rebel angels that conspired against him and that plotted against him. And so, it's important for us to understand that it wasn't for humanity that a place of punishment was created. It was for the devil and his angels, for being rebels, for fighting against him, and for conspiring to overthrow Christ and to tempt and deceive humanity. That it is because they have purposely led astray, caused division, created separation and war and angst and the perpetuation of evil, that they have established religions where they offer up children in blood and victim sacrifice, burning them on the altars of Baal and Moloch and Chemosh and Ashtaroth and all these pagan deities. That this is what they have been involved in for a very long time. And because of that, this kind of thing is ongoing even now. And it's because of these kind of abominations, these kind of behaviors, that the elite will be judged extremely. I put out in the Wisdom of Solomon, in that apocryphal text, you read the first 5 chapters, and it goes into great detail how these people and these bloodlines, these families, have been involved in such ritual, in the worship of these bloodlines for so very long. And so, looking at and examining, even with what's released through the WikiLeaks and all these different things, most people don't understand the significance of all that, and they think it's foolishness, to even consider the things that people are bringing forth and revealing in so much about these teachings. But this is the truth. Their involvement in the pedophilia, the Pizzagate, all of that. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And it's been surprising to me that they have been able to keep a lid on the story. It just shows you how controlled the mainstream and the politicians are, and the Justice Department, and the Attorney General, and it just shows you, how they have traditionally been above the law, and how even when it comes to such abomination as that which we see revealed in this particular story, that even then they are able to skirt, that they are even in this day and age able to escape persecution. And that no matter if you're Democrat or Republican, you toe the line for your friends and for your family members, your bloodline, to keep them out of trouble and to keep them from being prosecuted. Because no matter what party, they're all involved in the same kind of thing. I don't know if those of you know that that whole pedophilia island, Epstein's Island there in the Bahamas, that it was burned down from one end to the other. I thought that was pretty interesting. And so judgment is coming. Judgment is coming. The Most High will bring justice to them, and they will reap what they have sown for so very long. This is why it says in so many places in the scriptures that, the kings, it's the kings that will have punishment poured upon them. Even in Isaiah chapter 14, where it speaks about the bloodlines born to Satan, Lucifer, as the abominable branch, that they will wonder at the beast, and they will wonder about, how he's supposed to be great and he's supposed to be their God, and yet he's just like one of them. All they shall speak and say unto thee, art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? Thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of thy viols. The worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof? All the kings of the nations, even all of them, lie in glory, every one in his own house. But thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch, and as the raiment of those that are slain, thrust through with a sword, that go down to the stones of the pit, as a carcass trod under feet. All right. God bless all. Tomorrow, on Truth Frequency Radio, I'm going to be talking about some cryptocurrencies in the current market. God bless. Talk to you then. Shalom.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.